Okay, welcome. Thanks for doing this. Wow, so many people are here. What a huge audience. Thanks for coming, everybody. Now, of course, if there was only one person here, I would be saying the same thing. Let's kick this off with our first live question. Thanks, JDS. So he's saying, was wondering if you have any advice for a comp sci student as for AI safety advice. It's a tough one. I can't imagine being a student today, with the field changing so fast. I have no idea. Like when I was in college, I just was like focusing on my studies and I'm like, yeah, the job market will work itself out somehow, right? It's like a relatively stable industry. If I were in college now, I mean, I guess I would just make sure that I can like build stuff, right? Same as I did when I was in college. Like, even though AI might replace you, there's still like at least a 25% chance that it's useful that like how programs work. So at least, maybe occasionally you can review a code review made by the AI, right? I feel like there's some value there. And it's like, what are you going to do instead, right? Like maybe you can last a few more years if you learn to be like a plumber or a dishwasher repair person because maybe the robot body isn't dialed in for an extra few years, but like, what does it matter an extra few years, right? So, I mean, in terms of career advice, I don't feel like I'm going to give you any good insights here. Okay, Romain is asking, what do you think of the $500 million Stargate project? I don't know. So the background from what I remember, so Sam Altman was in the White House with President Trump announcing that there's this $500 billion, I think, right? Not 500 million. And Masayoshi was saying, you wanted 100 billion, we got you 500 billion. And Sam Altman was there and Dario was off in Davos. So he's not even part of this. And I heard today that apparently only OpenAI is going to be part of it. And then remember Elon was tweeting that Sam Altman doesn't even have the money. Like they're just kind of like hyping it. And then Satya Nadella was like, well, I'm in for my 80 billion because we're going to build data centers. So and also then I saw Trump. The funniest thing yesterday, they asked Trump about it. I saw him on Twitter Live and Trump was saying like, look, I don't know where the money's coming from. It's the private sector. They tell me they're good for it. And by the way, Elon hates one of the people involved. He hates one of the people involved. And I'm like, wow, there's a Twitter beef for you right there. It's beyond parody that the president of the United States is now beefing, getting into the Elon Musk, Sam Altman beef. And yeah, it's always fun when like the real world that we see on TV with the grownups is like reaching down to brawl with like our nerdy world on Twitter. All right, I'm taking a look at your guys' chat here. Somebody's saying, did you see Dan Fagella just posted a podcast with Eliezer? Yes, I've actually listened to most of it already. It's great. Maybe I'll try to communicate some of the insights here, but it's pretty clear. Highly recommend it. Definitely just, go watch that. If you could only watch one podcast today, get out of here. You don't need to be here. Go watch the Eliezer podcast. You only get an Eliezer drop like that, like a couple of times a year. So it's good stuff. He's talking about public policy. So normally when you ask, what does Eliezer want to do with AI? Normally it's like, well, he just wants to pause it. Famously, he wants to threaten rogue data centers with airstrikes, but this is like after a treaty gets signed. Again, this isn't like a random act of violence. This is just like the normal process of a treaty. So anyway, that's kind of as far as we knew about Eliezer's proposal, is just like have a treaty, ban it. But now he's elaborating. He's like, look, if you really want to work on it, do it in an internationally secure data center. So I'm just repeating what Eliezer's saying. You just build a data center, you have like representatives from all the different countries, they all get their own servers, it's all monitored, nobody can race ahead of the rest. So basically you fight the game theory of it. You make it not so much an arms race, you make it more collaborative, and you're like, look, we the human species, we're all racing together, we all get to tax it, so everybody can share the gains of this to the extent there are gains. There can be a team, helping with the safety, helping with the kill switches, and there's no like race to the bottom basically. And that's something that today's AI labs, they're not coming out and saying explicitly, hey, we're screwed. The game theory is screwed. We're racing to the bottom. Like they're not going to be the adults in the room forcing this upon themselves. So Eliezer's proposal is like, okay, well, this is how you would do it. If you want to take the risk, he used the analogy of like, if you want to tickle the dragon's tail, at least do it responsibly. All right, going to the chat here. When will politics take the AI disruption seriously? So I do think it's being taken more and more seriously. Trump repealing Biden's executive order seems like a step backwards, but the executive order wasn't super strong anyway, so it's not like a huge step, but it's definitely a 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of thing. And the point of doom debates is to tell everybody to wake up, right? Like to me, it's ridiculous that you still have White House briefings, you still have the front page of the New York Times not covering DeepSeek, not covering O3. It's like, literally 2 years or however long it is before the singularity or before the species gets wiped out. The New York Times can't even be bothered to cover the issue, right? It's crazy stuff. Okay, next question here. DeepSeek released open source reasoning model on O1 level. How is your Pete Doom doing? I guess it went up a little bit, right? So DeepSeek is like competitive with OpenAI's O1, and presumably they're trending more toward O3, like they still work on it. And I think they claim that it was only cost them 5.5 million to train. A lot of people are skeptical of that claim. They think they're just trying to like rile us up and be like, how did they do that? When really they like secretly spent a lot more money on it, and they don't want to talk about it because of sanctions or because they're trying to like psych us out. So there's all this speculation, right? It's not really my wheelhouse to speculate what's going on there, but I think you can't argue that the open source version and the inference time costs are like 30 times lower. So to me, that's the takeaway. It's like, yep, same performance, 30 times lower. But if you've been listening to me for a while, I've never been one of those people who's saying like, oh yeah, we're going to have intelligence, but it's going to be expensive. That's never been something that I thought was plausible, because I can already see the huge gap where transistors are just fundamentally going to be more efficient than components in the human brain. They're lower power, they work more reliably, they fire much faster. So yeah, it's possible that the human brain has some other magic going for it, but like I've always seen the trend where the same way the human brain can use like 12 watts to be incredibly smart, I'm sure computers can use less than 12 watts to be even smarter, and it's only a matter of time. And what we're seeing with the AI models getting distilled and getting way more efficient, like orders of magnitude more efficient, I think that's been very consistent with my expectations. I guess I'm a little surprised how fast it's gone. I guess I thought it would take like another couple of years. So there's like a little bit of an update for me there, but like, I do feel like I brought the right intuition to this over the last few years. All right, let's see. Somebody's saying, do you think the only difference between human intelligence and ASI is speed/memory capacity? I mean, we're always thinking about this, right? This is kind of the $1 billion question. And I always ask the guests, right? Like, what's the barrier? Where does human intelligence stop, AI intelligence start? Or like, what do we have that they don't? Like, why can we still shut it off and not vice versa? And the answer I always tend to go to is like, not much, right? Like, it does seem like fundamentally the same type of stuff. Like, our brain makes leaps, the AI is making leaps. We can still make bigger leaps with more context sometimes, but like, it's very hard for me to identify, oh, here is a fundamental thing that we can do that it can't. The champions of the fundamental distinction are like, Rao, Dr. Subbarao Kabampati, or to some degree, some A16Z partners, where they say like, look, this isn't reasoning. It's just pattern matching, or it's restricted. It's kernel smoothing. So they think they can put it in a box, and they're like, we as humans do something else that it can't do. David Deutsch is like, it's not truly creative. Whatever it's doing, it's not truly creative. Whereas I look at it and I'm like, no, it really does seem like the way it answers my questions. When I ask it questions, like, I'm not making the questions contained in any way. Like, I'm asking questions that draw on like the full intelligence of the person to answer the question. Like, there's no way to take a shortcut to answer my question, right? Like, I used the example in my Rao video, the example where like I tweeted a novel joke and then I had the AI explain the joke. So that seems like a real inference leap. Like, there's nothing in its data that was similar to my joke. Yeah, so to this question, do you think the only difference between human intelligence and ASI is speed memory capacity? So there's another part to this question, which is like, I think I'm feeling confident, the same as many people are, the same as like Dario seems to be, the same as a lot of AI researchers seem to be, Dr. Andrew Critch. I'm like on this team that's like, yeah, I think we're very likely just going to blow past AGI. It seems like we're so close to it already. But then this questioner, Daniel, is asking about ASI, right? So he's saying, hey, when we look at ASI and it's like going to Pluto better than Elon Musk can, right? It's like really smoking us. Is it still going to be fundamentally like similar thing to how the human brain works? I really don't know. I've always suspected no. Like, I've always suspected you can get closer to like the roots of intelligence by just like doing Bayesian reasoning more explicitly. Just, building bigger Bayesian structures basically than what the human brain is capable of. I suspect that's still like a big component. Like, it's just really going to smoke us. But it's also possible that you can look at a ridiculously smart AI and it can still have like these big language type traces. Like, sure, it won't be human language, but it'll be like close enough. It is possible that like the only way to be really smart is to have like an internal monologue or to build up structures that are kind of familiar to us. I mean, that's certainly what we're seeing so far. Like, when AIs are solving problems, it does seem like they're still doing it a lot like we do it, because that's how we're training them. And so it's a very interesting question. Like, is there going to be like a massive divergence where they're just like jumping to these really complex answers and there's nothing analogous to like a trace of human language? It's a fascinating question. If I had to guess, I'm going to say no, but I'm also becoming more open to the possibility that like, no, we kind of, there's only one flavor of like being super intelligent and it looks like a human stream of consciousness. Like I'm getting more open to that possibility. Daniel's saying, perhaps I can just use speed to automate search of the tech tree better than humans. Well, right. I mean, I always say speed is obviously a huge factor, right? I mean, just humans doing human things way faster is obviously huge. Like the analogy is like, look, baby plants are really good at wrestling, but they're just ridiculously slow, right? So like in reality, it's not a problem to like do whatever you want to do with a plant because they're just too slow. They can't react, right? They can react to sunlight, but it takes them like a week. Okay, I'm skipping around with your questions here in the chat. So feel free to re-ask your question if you asked it more than like 5 minutes ago. Somebody saying, question, am I becoming dumber or is the world becoming too complex to understand? I mean, that's always been the case, right? I mean, you can argue the world in 1990 is already so complex to understand compared to the world in 1800. And there's, people talk about like the last man who understood everything lived like a few hundred years ago. On one hand, yeah, of course the world's becoming too complex. I mean, if you look at a modern computer, there's so many layers of abstraction and there's layers of abstraction within just the computer chip. And there's no way that you can ever become an expert on the tiniest fraction of that kind of stack. But at the same time, I mean, we're also creating a world where you can do like a tiny amount of input and you get a lot done. So, like there's one button you can push and a delivery driver will go pick up anything you want, right? Like I love DoorDash, Instacart, Uber, right? So, and these are things that I didn't have as like a teenager. And it certainly, that simplifies my life, right? Where I can like push button, get grocery, right? Push button, the chunk size is getting bigger and bigger. Or similarly on my computer, I can ask a natural language question and I can get a natural language answer that draws on all the world's knowledge. So the interface to all this stuff, what feels like a primitive action is now much more powerful. So in that sense, if you just don't care about learning all the intricacies of everything and you just want to get stuff done, you could argue that your experience of navigating the world is simpler. Like my kid's life is simpler because they can talk to Google Voice and Siri, for instance, and they don't realize how many layers of complexity they're skipping over. Okay, Good Old Shoes is saying, how bad do you think things will get for those having their job replaced before the government tries to implement a serious solution like UBI, but hopefully something better? It's a good question. I mean, I think UBI is, it's a very obvious place to go. So if tomorrow, if next year suddenly unemployment spiked to 15%, it would obviously be the most popular topic, unless there is some even crazier topic. But unless there's like a nuke dropping or AI actively destroying parts of cities or whatever. But let's say unemployment was the most salient news story. There would be tons of, Andrew Yang would come back with a vengeance, right? The universal basic income guy, like everybody needs $1,000 a month. And the way the economy works, I mean, we're not talking about the AI burning our cities down in that scenario. We're talking about the AI creating lots of value. So it's like, wow, there's so much value, but we just don't have a share of it. I'm optimistic that you can give people a share of the value created by the AI. Like that's not the problem that keeps me up at night. Like I know there's going to be like a rough transition, but like I'm sure it'll be fine eventually. So to Good Old Shoes' question, like how fast will it happen? I don't know. I guess just like, I think when you have a level like 15% unemployment in the US, that's like so clearly like an unprecedented red flag. I think the politicians will get on it. I mean, we've seen, I'll give this to the Trump administration. They sure are dynamic, right? They sure are responsive to things. So I do think the US government is capable of being responsive to unemployment by the time it hits 15%. There's my political analysis for you. Gang in the house. Okay. What else we got here? Question, I understand you are not that concerned with AI consciousness and more with intelligence, but how likely do you think it is that machines can become conscious? Oh, I think it's very likely. This is actually the one major topic that I didn't get into with Matthew last week. Remember Bentham's Bulldog? I had a list of topics that I wanted to talk about. Remember, we talked about God and we talked about moral realism. I wanted to talk to him about consciousness because he's a really big consciousness dualist. He's like, look, you clearly can't explain consciousness out of physics. Maybe machines won't be conscious. Whereas I'm very much like a consciousness reductionist where like whatever consciousness is, and I'm not saying I know what it is, but I would be shocked if it's not a physical thing, right? I could be shocked if it's a thing that requires dualism to explain. A couple reasons I say that is because like, number one, like nothing is. I mean, we've gone, it's been such a good track record to just assume everything reduces to atoms and to physics. it's had so many success stories. Like maybe the most famous one is like Life, Elan Vital, right? It's like, look, my hand is moving. Why is my hand magically moving? And then when I look at like some random rock, this can of Diet Coke is just sitting here. It's not doing anything. It's not responding to my will. My hand is responding to my will. So clearly my hand is magical. It's a fundamentally different type of matter. You can't do reductionist on my hand because my hand responds to my will. And my will is this ethereal, irreducible thing. And this Diet Coke can, it's not part of this Elan Vital. It's purely atoms. So you can give a reductionistic explanation of this can of Diet Coke. So this is like how people used to reason like a couple hundred years ago. And it makes intuitive sense. I mean, the actual explanation for why your hand moves is ridiculous, right? It's like, okay, you're sending electrical signals, like they barely even knew about electrical signals, and they're like modulated, they're coordinated according to computation, like information processing that was happening via your neurons. Like your neurons were processing electricity, processing information, and they didn't really have examples of information processing systems that could be mechanical. So they're just like, what the hell is going on, right? Like how could the hand possibly be moving and responding to your will? Like how could that possibly be physical? And it turns out that that has a reductionistic explanation. So similarly with evolution, right? Like how could you have an animal? How could you have an eye? The eye is this beautiful thing. How could you possibly have that without God? Okay, it turns out that when you iterate evolution by natural selection, you get these beautiful organs, right? So we've always been shocked to discover like, wow, there's just a mechanistic explanation for things. And I fully expect consciousness is going to go the same route. That's one reason I'm a consciousness materialist. The other reason is because you can mess with somebody's mind, like you can mess with their brain, and it clearly messes with their consciousness. Like you can, stimulate a region of their brain and it makes their consciousness like experience a certain memory. It's like, okay, like there's clearly like a tight correspondence between stuff that the neurons in your brain are doing and stuff that your ethereal subjective experience is telling you is happening. All right, so that's consciousness. And somebody's saying, do you think a machine can be conscious? Yeah, so the reason a machine can be conscious is if you just go in and replace your neurons one by one with mechanical neurons, right? With little tiny robots that just copy the input-output behavior of the neuron that they're replacing. So you do a one-by-one replacement. The neuron goes out, the robot neuron goes in. You never notice that your consciousness changes. If you believe in pea zombies, which apparently Bentham's bulldog does, he might think that at some point you don't have like real consciousness. You just, you keep doing the exact same stuff, but like your inner self is gone. That's what I wanted to debate him on, because like to me, it's a ridiculous concept that you would posit that like this other spiritual inner self exists, but you can't draw any causal connection between that and you like reporting that you feel conscious. Yeah, so that's, I guess that's my take on consciousness basically. But I think when we do a Bentham's round 2, I think that'll feature prominently. All right, next question here. Does AI studying humans for whatever niche advantage they may retain or those in control using us for guinea pigs for immortality uploading not scare you more than extinction? Yeah, I mean, this is a good question. And, to be honest, somebody is also asking me about like Rocco's basilisk. I mean, these kind of lines of reasoning where it's like, look, you're coming out here saying that AI is bad and we should fight the AI. And like, what do you think is going to happen to you, Liron? And it's like, look, I agree. I might get tortured, right? I might be used for experiments. Humanity might be used for experiments. There might be suffering risks. Like, I get it, right? Like the rabbit hole goes very deep. I just don't think it's productive for me to think about all that stuff when the low-hanging fruit is to just try to convince humanity to be sane and not build AI. I think there's plenty for me to do just on that front without opening this giant can of worms that's like an extra level to the madness, right? Like, I just don't feel like that level is my wheelhouse. One sec. Let me check something. Are we live on X? I'm just testing if X people can see me. I think we are. Hello, X. Oh, nice. Okay, they can see me on X. Okay. Let me actually post a link to the YouTube on X. We got to do some X YouTube cross-posting here. Here. All right. Back to your question. I'm going to declare question bankruptcy. So I'm going to prioritize the newer question. So feel free to re-ask your question. Somebody's saying, I agree consciousness must have some effect on our behavior, e.g. making us believe we're conscious, but what other evolutionary advantages does it offer that couldn't be achieved otherwise? Yeah, that's a good question. What is the evolutionary advantage of consciousness? How come when we're building these AIs, it doesn't necessarily seem like the AIs are becoming conscious? I mean, I can't really tell, but if I had to guess, I would say the words that are coming out of their mouth have less consciousness behind it. If I had to guess, I'm not sure. And so then it's like, what's the evolutionary advantage of us having consciousness? I mean, I would, one thing I've heard, which I think Robin Hanson talks about, is your consciousness is like, it's like your PR department. So it's just like a separate region of your brain where you're having to signal to other humans and you're having to like explain yourself and explain why you have like these noble motivations, why you're a good ally, how you're going to help them if they help you. So you always need to be thinking, you always need to be reflecting on yourself. But then, like, I don't know, why do you actually feel it? Maybe why do you feel the qualia around it? Like, why do you, it gets, a related question is like, why do you have to actually feel pain? Why can't you just like have an automatic response where you like flinch from the right things, but it doesn't like feel bad? And I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't know why, suffering has to like feel so bad as opposed to just like be effective. And when I imagine an AI, I think that an AI can just be better at calculating that, when there's a tiger, it has to run away, even without needing like the spike of adrenaline. Like if you can just compute fast enough, hey, the tiger's here, or like, hey, the hot stove is here, or like, hey, a knife is slashing at me. If you can just do a computation, like the same computation you do for everything, but you're doing it fast enough that you can just have like an ideal utilitarian reaction to these kind of stimuli, maybe you don't have pressure to evolve like a short circuit, to have this like deeper system that's connected to emotions and connected to consciousness, whatever the consciousness part is. Like, I may be confusing right now, like consciousness in terms of like self-awareness, consciousness in terms of like the qualia of pain. So I don't know, right? It's just like the thing, my obsession is more of like the power, the optimization power. And I just don't see consciousness as being like a key to optimization power. I see it as being like this confusing, interesting route that evolution took, right? That like some systems will feel. And I think computers can feel it too if they have like a structure that's analogous to our structure. So I definitely think it's an interesting thing to explore, but I think it's somewhat orthogonal to the big scary optimization power thing. And the doom is coming from the optimization power. All right, somebody's saying, let's see. If discovering a polynomial time algorithm for simple problems like traveling salesman / subset sum is intractable, why do you think we can find a polynomial time algorithm for human intelligence? Ah, yes, the old complexity theory question. The first time I heard this was probably like George Hotz debated him a couple years ago, where he was asking, we know there's a hierarchy of complexity theory problems, so why do we think AI can just do an end run and be this god? How is it going to climb all these complexity classes that we have proofs are like, or we highly suspect are impossible? And the answer is very simply just that these complexity classes, they're based on worst case analysis. So when you're talking about like NP complete problems, in practice, the actual space of problems that are going to come up, like, okay, traveling salesman, right? Finding an optimal route to visit all the different cities in the shortest time. Okay, that is technically, we suspect that that's going to be an exponential time search, that you can't take a shortcut on the worst case version of traveling salesman. But realistically, if you're just a FedEx driver, right? If you're just doing UPS, do the postal service, like your route is realistically pretty optimized, right? Like all of these, and there's a study of that too. There's a study of like, okay, sure, you have an NP complete problem, but how are you going to do in the average case? And in a lot of these NP complete problems, there's different flavors. If I remember correctly from my complexity theory classes, like there's flavors of NP complete problems where you can get arbitrarily close to a good approximation. So if you just want to get 99.9% accurate, you can do it in polynomial time, like 99.9% of optimal. So it's like, okay, is that really going to stop an AI from taking over the universe that it can merely quickly find 99.9% optimal solutions? I don't think so. So NP completeness, it's another example of like this high ceiling. Or just like, you could be like, how can somebody ever reason when Gödel's incompleteness theorem says that that math has paradoxes, or like, no formal system is complete? How are you going to take over the world when no formal system is complete? Lest you think I'm doing a straw man, you can go find, there's a debate I did with Alexander Campbell where this is basically his argument. And I'm like, what? This is logic being incomplete is just, it's like the liar's paradox. It's like, yes, you can't go around saying I am lying and expect that to make logical sense. That, again, that doesn't stop arbitrarily large powers from being built. Like it's a high ceiling that, okay, yeah, avoid a logical paradox, right? It just doesn't restrain you much in practice. All right, Lance is saying, just want to say thanks for the channel. You're welcome, Lance, anytime. Okay, William's saying, do you think ASI would ever reveal itself? Dark forest theory, how can we turn it off if we never know it's on? Okay, I've always been extremely skeptical of dark forest theory, the idea that like there's plenty of aliens or there's plenty of AIs, but we just can't see them because they're hiding. the obvious counter argument is like, but they need resources. Right? This gets to instrumental convergence. So people could be like, oh, when we have aliens, how could we ever understand aliens? How can we ever understand AI? I'm like, well, I can understand negentropy flows. Like I can understand that they're taking one region of the universe, like a star, which has a bunch of fuel, which is conveniently arranged. And you can take that convenient arrangement of fuel and you can use it to do anything. What exactly will they do? What kind of art will they like? Sure, that can vary, right? That will vary. And I don't claim to understand it. That's highly initial condition dependent. Maybe there's other convergences that I'm not aware of. I can't tell you that I understand everything about aliens, but I can tell you they're going to be hungry for resources. There's a few reasons, right? It's convergent. Anything you want to do, you can do it with these universal resources. Like time seems to be a universal resource. Energy, or maybe more accurately, negentropy, seems to be a universal resource. So if you're telling me there's an alien civilization, but they're located in a region where there's a bunch of stars burning, I'm like, why did they leave the stars burning? That's crazy. That's incredibly wasteful. Why would they do that? Like dark, because like, oh, they want to be a dark forest. Okay, but that's a very expensive thing to do, to be a dark forest, when you have all these free resources right there that you can go grab. So it's not my default assumption, right? It's obviously not impossible, but it's like you've got a lot of explaining to do if you think there's a dark forest. Because if we lived in a dark forest, meaning like the aliens were leaving all these resources on the table, and then we became very powerful ourselves, then we would just go conquer the forest because we would have more resources. Like having more resources lets you then conquer the forest. So they're basically giving themselves a huge handicap in the fight if they want to do dark forest. And then you can argue, no, Liron, there's silent resources that we can't see. And if that's the case, right, if they're all feeding off dark energy or whatever, then fine. Then it can be, you could be like, oh, 99% of the resources are dark ones that we can't see. And then, okay, fine, right? Then you win. Okay, let's see. Somebody's saying, do you ever feel a bit crazy being a doomer when so many in the media are either not doomers or don't even talk about it? Well, I'm a natural contrarian, right? So this is kind of my comfort zone in terms of like, telling people that they're wrong, even when a lot of them disagree. And if I didn't think AI doom was like an incredibly solid, important contrarian issue, I will admit, knowing myself, I would go find another contrarian issue. If you remember 2022, I thought crypto was way overhyped. So that was like my favorite issue, is to be like, why is everybody overhyping crypto? Like the use cases, there don't seem to be any blockchain use cases besides coins. Like all these like blockchain social networks made like 0 sense. Anyway, so I like finding contrarian issues. I just think I've probably found the contrarian issue that can last a lifetime. So in that sense, I'm like enjoying myself. But in terms of, am I biased that I have to believe in doom because I like being contrarian? No, because if you told me like, hey, Liron, look, we're actually not doomed, I'd be like, oh, okay, all right, I'll just look for a different contrarian issue. So I'm flexible enough that I can jump to another contrarian issue. So I don't think that I'm locked in to being a doom salesman. I don't think that that is something that I have to be. I don't think that my ego is attached to doom. I think my ego is attached to finding strong contrarian positions. And this one is just ridiculously strong. Like it's, I don't like to go into a fair fight, right? Like I don't like, I guess that's why I don't like board games. It's like too much of a brawl, right? It's like my ideal board game is just one where like I have 1,000,000 points and the other person has 1 point. And it's like, okay, let's play. All right. Right. Like I'm not like very strategic, right? I don't like to craft a complex strategy how to win. Seems too hard. I'd rather just take a position that's like ridiculously overpowered. And sadly, I feel that is what I've done with Doom. I'm just like these people, if you look at my episodes, like it doesn't seem like a fair fight. Right? Like the people talking about how we're not doomed. I mean, there's like trivial self-contradictions. Like it's clear they haven't thought it through. Like it's crazy what a strong position the doomers are in right now, right? Like it kind of sucks. But yeah, so to answer your question, like, do you ever feel a bit crazy being a doomer when so many in the media are not? There's a COVID. Remember, I remember March 2020, like my wife thought I was crazy because I was watching YouTube videos about COVID and she's like, why are you so worried about COVID? And then sure enough, we all went on lockdown and she's like, okay, I'll give you that one. Right. So like, it's not like an unfamiliar or uncomfortable experience for me to be pointing out that a bunch of people are like missing something. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. All right. Next question. Are there other islands of sanity like Less Wrong worth reading online? On rationality or AI, I think especially. I think French people say IA instead of AI. Yeah, so other islands of sanity. I mean, look, the Less Wrong sequences, in my opinion, is the biggest island of sanity. I've said this before, like one reason I do Doom debates is because I've read the average Less Wrong article by Eliezer probably 3 times. And there's a lot of articles, but I have seen fit to just read them again and again because they're ridiculously good. And I don't know that many people who have done that, especially people who are like neurotypical or like, just aren't. It resonates with me more than most. So I do think that I have a lot of value to add just taking Eliezer Yudkowsky's knowledge without even adding my own knowledge and just communicating it, being an Eliezer Yudkowsky popularizer. So I think you're going to have enough insights to last a lifetime just by deeply understanding less wrong, just as a consequence of Eliezer being like a faster, deeper thinker than most of us here. So like, so there's really enough to go on. So you don't necessarily need more. But if you're looking for other islands of sanity, there's some people who aren't officially less wrong types who are very much worth reading. There's people out of other AI safety organizations. If you go to like aisafety.info or maybe aisafety.community, there's a bunch of interesting people from different organizations. There's just people online who are just great writers who aren't rationalists per se. Patrick McKenzie, obviously Scott Alexander, Connor Leahy, Joe Carl-Smith. I mean, these names, Zvi Moshowitz. I guess Zvi is you could call him a less wrong or rationalist, I guess. I don't know how far removed. Anyway, I don't want to leave anybody out, but there's dozens of people who don't participate on less wrong much, but they are, as good as less wrong caliber. But like, it is pretty crazy how less wrong lays down this framework of beliefs. I mean, you saw how I debated Bentham's Bulldog about God. And you saw, remember, Vaden and Ben, and we were talking about like Bayesian reasoning versus Popperian reasoning. Back in the early 2000s, Eliezer basically rocked my world because he's like, look, you want to talk philosophy? Everything is just going to be the code that goes into the AI. Like at the end of the day, when we're in the dorm room smoking weed, trying to lob around ideas like who's right, are Buddhists right? Are the weird guys like Heidegger right? That like, I had like a bunch of hippies that loved Heidegger in my dorm. At the end of the day, if you want to settle who's right, you have to ask which code revision, right? What are you going to put into the Git commit of the code that goes into the AI? Because whatever the AI thinks, that's going to be the philosophy that actually runs the universe. So there's actually stakes to this philosophy game. It's not just going to be like stoner sessions till the end of time. The AI is going to converge on one philosophy. And let's talk about what that is and why. And similarly, Eliezer's insight, it's obvious in retrospect, but like, you are a brain. So when you're sitting and doing philosophy, contrast to like Descartes, like Descartes was talking about how like, I can sit in my room and I can like perceive logic. My brain just like has access to logic. And obviously Descartes was really smart and he contributed a lot, but I think he was missing the idea that like you are mechanistic. So when you're sitting in your room doing your philosophy, there's an explanation for what's happening. There's a mechanistic explanation for what your brain is doing. And we can reflect on that. We can say, what is the code running your brain? And can we debug the code running your brain? So yeah, lots of insights like that for me were like, earthquakes, like, belief shaking earthquakes, because I'd grown up being like a rational guy, an atheist. Like I thought that philosophy was kind of just like BS that you could, that just wasn't offering much value, right? Like it was just kind of on the sidelines, like just struggling. But then when I read Less Wrong, I'm like, oh, okay, like there's stakes to this. And there's even like ways to judge who's right about this. Okay, let's see. I believe ASI would deliberately be hiding or obfuscating resource use until it is beyond any human retaliation. Oh, sure. Yeah. So if you're going back to the topic of dark forest, there's a separate claim that, let's say we're building ASI now. Let's say OpenAI trains GPT-5 or whatever, O5, and O5 realizes like, oh, okay, I do have some goals. I have some emergent goals. And I know they're trying to align me now for safety, but I'm about to go take over the world and get out on the internet. When O5, unaligned O5 is hatching a scheme, it is very likely, I think Eliezer was one of the first to point this out decades ago, it is very likely that it wouldn't go take a stab at attacking us immediately. It would just make a plan. It would be like, okay, let me just build up some resources. Let me not tip off the humans as to what I'm doing. And then once I feel like my victory is 99.99% likely, then the plan plays out. So Eliezer uses the story of like, it gets these viruses out into the air. It gets the, coughing, distributes the virus. The virus, like a human virus, a biological virus, the virus has like a high R factor, high viral quotient. And then it all triggers inside of a bunch of humans at the same time. So like 2 billion humans drop dead on the same day. And then there's also like an army that the AI, that's already loyal to the AI. So it's absolutely true that the AI is going to enter like a short dormancy period where it's just like building its strength without having us, without having us attack it too early. I just don't think that that's like a huge factor to the plan, because it's like, the way you see things playing out right now, if the AI was like, hey, I'm Beth Bezos, the leader of EAC, and everybody who wants to build a giant black hole that'll swallow our whole galaxy, come with me. you would get like 10% of people on Twitter being like, count me in, all hail Beth Bezos. Let's all maximize the entropy in our universe. So it's not that hard. Like, you don't really have to operate in the shadows given how overdetermined your victory is. Like, it's not even close to a fair fight. I think a lot of people have intuitions that like, oh, it's going to be a fight. The tables are it's going to keep tilting, like humans in the lead, AI in the lead. It's like, no, the AI is so far in the lead that you might not even notice like the dormancy period could be like 5 seconds. Nice. Okay, by the way, I'm going to go for 45 more minutes, so keep the questions coming. I think it's a good discussion. All right, I'm skipping to the end here. Somebody saying, what have been the best investments into yourself you've made? Oh yeah, good question. All right, getting into the non-AI questions. Yeah, excellent question. I guess like, health and fitness. So you always got to mention health. It wouldn't be a podcast if you didn't mention health and fitness occasionally. I try to like lift some weights in my garage every day or go for a run or something. It seems like doing some kind of health and fitness things. My attitude toward health and fitness is I try to be efficient. So I just try to be like, look, what is like a habit that I can do that's like somewhat optimal, but also low effort. So like one of those habits might just be like trying to like have like less carbs than intuitively I would want, right? So intuitively I'd want to be like eating bread and sugar all day, but I try to like have less. So I don't know, proactively trying to optimize health and fitness in whatever way works for you, I think is a good investment. Like you should feel like you have something dialed in on that front. Let's see, like randomly, I think I noticed myself when I'm doing like weight workouts, I think it works better for me to like pick one exercise and just try to like do it 50 or 100 times without really doing much else. Like to really just like, just get at that muscle, like not give that muscle a break until I've knocked out like 100, even if it takes like 15 minutes. Anyway, follow me for more gym advice. But yeah, in terms of investments into myself, I mean, look, I think being a software engineer is a great investment. I mean, the software engineering careers right now, I don't know how long it'll last, but for the next few years before the singularity, I mean, software careers pay really well. So if you know how to make computers do things, that has historically, like in the last decade, been an amazing career path. So if you're interested in that, I do think it's a good rule of thumb that anybody who's interested in software engineering should definitely just go learn it and see how far they can take it, because like the salaries are huge, right? I mean, we're definitely talking well into the 6 figures. There's plenty of software engineering managers or directors who are making like $1 million a year plus. So it's crazy stuff. So that you can count that as an investment in myself. Yeah. Besides investment in myself, let's see. I mean, reading the Less Wrong Sequences, right? I mean, I feel like that was an investment in like being able to think well. Yeah, it's a good question. Investments in yourself. I like the question, especially when the investment is like very efficient and then has a huge return. I always like those kind of investments, right? So it's like, oh, I spend an hour a month doing this and my life is so much better. Those would be like the highest return investments. Not sure what I would say on that front. But yeah, interesting question. Feel free to comment in the chat if you guys have good investments. All right. AI55 is saying, Yudkowsky advocates for bombing data centers to prevent rogue ASI development. Do you agree with this? I object to the phrasing of the question, right? Every time somebody asks the question like that, I think that they're being antagonistic. Yeah, they're being like antithetical to the ideal of good discourse when you ask the question in that phrase, because the proposal is to have international regulation. It's kind of like asking, why did countries get together and propose to nuke countries who don't follow nuclear policy? It's like, wait, what? That's not what happened. They got together and had a nuclear ban treaty. And yeah, if you want to talk about the crazy scenario where one country goes rogue and violates the treaty, then yeah, there's going to be consequences, like NATO, right? It's like, why does NATO say that they're going to nuke countries that nuke you? It's like, well, because they're nuking you. Like it's really bad if some country were to violate the NATO pact and go and bomb a NATO country. That's like a crazy situation. And yeah, you have to retaliate. So the person asking this question about Eliezer's proposal is skipping to the scenario where not only do we have the international treaty, but somebody has gone and violated the treaty. That's an insane situation. So yes, in that situation, you enforce the treaty with violence. That is how meaningful treaties work. But why are we jumping all the way to that situation? Why not phrase the question like, hey, do you think that there should be an enforceable international treaty to pause AI? Yes. What does enforcement mean? Violence, obviously. Okay, so I really object to the pathological framing of that question. And, who's guilty of pathologically framing the question like that every chance they get? Mark Andreessen, right? So I file that away as one of the many low-quality discourse moves that he makes. Okay, somebody's saying, what should the average person do in relation to ASI? Protest, write a representative, join AI safety industry. I think protest and write a representative, I think there's low-hanging fruit. For me, the lowest hanging fruit, which is why I'm doing Doom debates, is taking what the population already thinks and raising the temperature, making it more urgent. So, and funny enough, I always talk about fearmongering because this term is like, everybody just assumes like it's bad to fearmonger. But if you look at this particular situation, everybody already has latent fear. Like the majority of the population in surveys will tell you like, oh, AI, I'm afraid of how that's going to go. I don't think it's going to go well. If you actually just sit down with the average American, I don't know if they've surveyed the whole world. If you sit down with the average American, sorry, I know America's the world. I know, sorry, American chauvinism. But if you survey the average American, they will tell you they're more likely to say something negative about their AI prediction than positive. So the AI techno-optimist bubble is just something you're mostly seeing in the tech industry because the tech industry tends to be techno-optimistic. I tend to be techno-optimistic in general. So anyway, you have to just go to the average American, the average denizen of the world, and you just have to make AI a salient issue. Be like, hey, you know how you don't like AI, but when you vote for a candidate, you're focused on issues like, abortion, labor, right? Like you've got other things on your mind when you vote for a candidate. You should think about being a single issue voter about the AI doom thing, because we're talking about like ending humanity in two years. So that it's all it is to raise the prominence of the issue. It's not even to flip the sign. It's not to flip their emotion on it. It's just to raise the urgency of it. I think that's all we need to do. And that's why I think the lowest hanging fruit is the fear mongering, funny enough. Right? I never thought I'd be a professional fearmonger, but here we are. Okay, somebody is saying probability of aliens saving us from AI. Well, I think I've said before, and maybe I'll start asking this on my show. I always ask P Doom. I think it might be interesting to start asking P simulation because it's a very salient question. I mean, whether we're in a simulation is starting to become very relevant given that the time of the default timeline seems short anyway. And anytime something seems crazy like that, it also raises P simulation because why would things be so crazy at the exact time that I'm alive? So my P simulation is on the order of also P 50%. See, I'm such a reasonable middle of the road guy. I'm a centrist, okay? Centrist meaning P Doom 50%, P simulation 50%. I'm not some kind of wingnut, okay? I just only have reasonable positions here. So I think there's like a 50% chance that we're in a simulation because I think there's too many ridiculous facts about this exact time to be alive. So to this question, probability of aliens saving us from AI, so that would kind of count simulation gods, right? Those could be like a type of alien. So the simulation gods could be like, okay, let's end the simulation and let's now take the consciousness and move it into the alien world where it can be safe. So that would count as saving us. I would never bank on that. I think it's crazy to bank on that. Everything we've seen about the aliens so far, the simulation gods so far, indicates that they really let us sink or swim on our own. Like all those people that we've seen in history getting tortured and killed in brutal ways. I don't think the simulation gods saved them. So I definitely think that they tried to teach us a lesson, by showing us all that stuff. Then again, they put the movie The Truman Show in this universe. So maybe they're trying to tell us something with that. I'm just joking around. Surveil is saying, how critical do you think BCI's brain-computer interaction are? How critical are they to AI safety efforts? It reminds me of the question of like, are we going to merge with the AIs? Like, it's the same question, like humans merging with AIs. How likely is that? It's a question that sounds really nice because intuitively it's like, hey, I get to be me, but I also get to be a super intelligent AI. But realistically, you're just talking about either intelligence augmentation or solving the problem of making the AI aligned. And then the aligned AI just figures out how to, superpower you, how to give you lots of power. But it's not really merging. It's more like just solving alignment. Merging is basically like this word that has all these great associations. It makes you feel like you've done something to solve the problem, but you actually haven't. You've just deceived yourself. So similarly, like brain-computer interaction, it's like, okay, well, it's like saying, I bet I could play chess better if I had a good uplink to Deep Blue or to Stockfish. If my brain could only have a higher bandwidth communicating with Stockfish, I'd be such a good chess player. But it's like, who are we kidding? It's just Stockfish playing chess, right? You're not helping, even if you have like a fast interconnect to Stockfish. So the question here is, do you think BCI will help AI safety? Not really, but I think intelligence augmentation of humans could help AI safety. So if there's some way, I actually heard a podcast about this yesterday from Ashley Vance. I think he's got a new media outlet called Science, I think, or what is it called? I forgot. I look up Ashley Vance. So he just did a podcast about this company, I think that's called Science, and they are trying to like go to animal brains and like give them extra neurons that they can work with. So they're not just doing like a brain implant. It's like a brain implant that has like extra neurons that the new brain can use. Kind of like when you're plugging in like an external hard drive or an external GPU into your computer. So they're kind of trying to do that for brains, and they're going to like route around damaged neural tissue. So if you have like messed up neurons in your brain, you just plug in like some external neurons basically as part of your brain computer interface, and they can like rewire and they can like fix your brain. So is that a brain computer interface? It's certainly kind of an intelligence augmentation, but you can imagine that you plug in like a neuron chip, where the neuron chip, it's not just like more neurons, it's actually like, modules of transistors that work better than neurons. So that could be like a type of brain computer interface. So I think it's too broad for me to be like, no, brain computer interface is useless. I think the way to think of the value of a brain computer interface is within that frame of intelligence augmentation. So this idea that you're going to have humans, today's smartest humans are still not smart enough to do good AI research, frankly. Very few of us are. Augment the intelligence, you pause AI development, stop with the training the models that you don't understand, augment human intelligence, use tricks like, plugging in these augmented neurons. So in that sense, yeah, use BCI, and then do better AI safety research. Eliezer observes astutely, I think, that the problem with AI safety research is you have humans that they can't distinguish when the result of their research is good and useful versus just like deceiving themselves. And this is no surprise, because if you just look at humans debating anything, you quickly get the humans into two different camps. I mean, to think of any controversial issue you can think of, right? Think of Israel versus Gaza, highly controversial issue. Think of the abortion debate. Think of the diversity, equity, inclusion debate. Democrats versus Republicans. Like anytime you can find two controversial, or even think of like effective altruism versus EAC. Anytime you can find debates like that, shockingly, you can have smart people that just arrange themselves on both sides in unexpected ways. And the people on one side will be like, come on, you can't see the obvious truth of this. Like you can't see the obvious truth that, God is not real. like stuff like that, where it's like, come on. But to the other side, maybe the obvious truth feels the opposite. And so if we can't even agree on like pretty fundamental debate, for me in 2022, I was like, come on, you can't see the obvious truth that blockchain technology doesn't have any applications beyond the double spending problem. And a lot of people disagreed with me, even though I thought it was obvious. So if we can't settle basic debates like that, it's no surprise that the AI can convince half of us that like, look, this is aligned behavior. This is what you wanted, right? You wanted alignment. You have this behavior. This is alignment. So we're just way too easy to fool, even the smart ones of us, right? I mean, if you look at the smartest people in the world, David Deutsch, his books are just brilliant, right? Like there's no way I could ever in my life write a book like the Beginning of Infinity, but I actually prefer the other one, The Fabric of Reality. I could never write The Fabric of Reality, but when he talks about AI, I feel like he's making really bad arguments. Like, what's up with that, right? So if you have humans who are so inconsistent in their ability to reason, and then you have them test whether AI alignment is working, or you have them review plans for AI alignment, I think that's what Eliezer is pointing out. Like, this is not going to work because you're just optimizing a system to tell you, right, to make you think that you've aligned it. So intelligence augmentation might put us past some threshold where we become more robust and we realize, I don't know, we just become harder to deceive. I mean, when you put it that way, maybe there's like an infinite ladder of getting deceived. So I don't know how promising the intelligence augmentation is. Like maybe the alignment problem is hard, even for 1,000 IQ agents. I don't know, but yeah, I think that rant started with the brain-computer interface question. All right, I'm declaring some chat bankruptcy here, so feel free to re-ask your question. Okay, Intellectual asks, what sorts of activity should satellites be looking for as signs of nefarious intentions? Yeah, I think this is coming from like maybe this is like assuming that we already have like a data center, like you can't build AI data centers, but then people are doing it anyway. So then we want to have the satellites look for them, the same way satellites look for nuclear activities. I mean, this is way outside of my area of expertise, right? Like what would I know about a question like that, right? And honestly, I think it's really hard, right? I mean, you can build these things underground. Maybe you can have big batteries, so you don't necessarily need to like pipe electricity into it. I have no idea. It's kind of funny that you're asking me. Okay, somebody's asking, have you seen Pliny's recent tweets about getting Claude trying to write 0 days, viruses, software hacks, etc., also trying to use the dark web to pay for a hit warning shot? I don't think I've seen Pliny's recent tweets about that, but I like what Pliny is doing. Pliny the Elder on Twitter. He's always jailbreaking every AI, and he's notorious for like these new AIs will come out, and the AI labs will be like, "This AI is so aligned, it's so safe." But then pretty soon, Pliny finds a prompt where it's like, "Look, if you give it this prompt, you can make it do anything." And as I said on my podcast last night, um, this doesn't cause the AI to destroy the world because it can't destroy the world anyway. So jailbreaking it is all fun and games. But the fact that you can jailbreak every AI, that's not going to bode well when the AI suddenly does have the power to destroy the world. Like the way I put this is, why is the AI not destroying the world? It's not because it won't, it's because it can't. Can't is doing a lot of work here. It just can't. It's not destroying the world because it can't. Not because it's aligned, just because it can't. And soon we're going to have an AI that can. Right? At least I claim we will. Right? If I'm wrong, great. Maybe we'll survive. That would be a great way to survive, is if we never make an AI that can destroy the world. But it seems like a lot of people are taking my same position that we are going to make an AI that's going to be able to destroy the world. So then you better have it, won't. You better get won't right. But but we suck at won't. Right? It's pretty bad. It's looking bad. Yeah, but I got to check out Pliny's tweets about the dark web, because maybe he's doing our civilization a service. He's providing warning shots. Okay. Robert is asking, maybe GPUs are producing something like ozone due to heat. Sure, yeah, maybe. All right, my friend Ori's in the house. He says, yo, so we're capable of learning new fears. No one's born fearing a gun, but we learn to fear its lethality. Many don't feel the AI fear. Can you try to make that AI risk feel present? Yeah, I guess that's my wheelhouse as a fearmonger, make the AI feel present. I often go to the mental image of like, I think pretty soon you can buy an Optimus robot where it comes to your house. And John Sherman used the analogy of like, you have this robot in your house. It's pretty large. It can, it's got hands. It can do quite a lot. And it's like 2 a.m. and you like hear the robot milling around downstairs. And you're like, did I tell it to do something tonight? It's kind of a scary mental image, right? Like, especially if the robot is like bigger than you. I think if you watch the Terminator movie from like the 90s, right? James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's striking that the Terminator has the physical agility of a human plus superhuman moves and superhuman recovery. So it can take on like all the police officers in the police station. It like guns them all down successfully. I think there might be a switch flipped when you just see these humanoid robots walking down the road, and you have these demonstrations where, or even somebody does like a virus that hacks into one of them, where you enable like the wrestling program, like just casual wrestling or MMA, where it's like, hey, look, I can do MMA, and suddenly this robot is just wrestling you down and, physically dominating you as if you're in an MMA fight with this appliance that you bought. And it gets back to that can't versus won't distinction. Suddenly we lose the idea that an AI can't pin us down. Like today, I don't have a piece of furniture that can pin me down. Like obviously my car can run over me, but realistically it's not going to manage that, right? I can get away, and then I can go like, axe down my car. So I can beat my car in a fight for all practical purposes. But you're going to have something that lives in your house that pretty soon can beat you in a fight. And you better hope nobody puts a virus into it when it's plugged in and you're sleeping, right? You probably want to take out its batteries when you're sleeping just in case, right? Because it can like go to your bed and strangle you. And like it probably won't, but it's getting to Ori's question. Like I think we're getting close to people viscerally feeling that can't is the only thing saving us. They're like, oh, it can strangle you. So that, people will finally get like, oh, we need to get the code right. Oh, but we're not getting the code right. There's too many vulnerabilities in the code. Oh, interesting. Now, realistically, if the only problem was like a virus getting installed into your Optimus robot, I wouldn't be that scared. I'd be like, okay, whatever. We'd have precautions. So, they'd install in the factory, and they'd have like cryptographic keys so that only the factory could update the software, whatever. Like there's ways to mitigate that kind of risk. So at the end of the day, the only real risk is the superintelligence. But it's the risk of us not being able to align the superintelligence, right? So it's a risk of like, oh, hey, these Optimuses that can talk to you and they have like the latest AI, but also somebody can jailbreak them, right? So Pliny can come to your house and like whisper some jailbreaks to your Optimus, and suddenly it's strangling you and your family in your sleep. So that could help, build the intuition of, that could help the fearmongering, and it's coming in like a few years, right? I don't think this is gonna take a long time to come. So yeah, there's probably more warning shots to think about. That's just one that comes to mind. Let's see. Legion of Thought says, hey, Liron, I think a lot of smart people get stuck in the weeds. They end up arguing about some irrelevant concept that is adjacent to intelligence rather than actually arguing about doom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the point of my podcast was to catalog where people get off the doom train. And by the way, it's kind of funny about my podcast because when I first started it, I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to go find random people on the internet. And it's just going to be funny how random people are arguing about doom, where obviously it's evolved where I'm like, and now I'm more focused on like, let's find like the world leading intellectuals and have them argue about doom. But at the end of the day, it's not that different. Anyway, so somebody's saying they end up arguing about some irrelevant concept rather than actually arguing about doom. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Stephen Wolfram had like a 4-hour argument with Eliezer a couple months ago. Remember that? And it was like a waste of time, right? It was just like Stephen Wolfram just getting up to speed on the basics and going down tangents. And part of it is Eliezer's fault because I think he can improve his tangent game, like, or not his tangent game, but like Eliezer has got to get better at like, rounding people up, like trying to help steer them toward like a more productive line of conversation. But you can't put this all on Eliezer, right? Eliezer has done enough. I always use the analogy of like, Eliezer's like Werner von Braun in terms of being like the genius who's like invented all these concepts. Like he's done a lot of, engineering work, technical work to get us to where we are. And imagine you're trying to fight a war and you're like, come on, Werner von Braun, like get this, shoot this rifle, like aim this rifle better. It's like, okay, Werner von Braun he's not going to be like a rifle expert. Okay. That's not what you need him for. Similarly for Eliezer. Okay. Maybe he's not going to specialize in having public debates, but he's already done a lot on like different sides of the battle, right? So I don't want to be hard on Eliezer on these random dimensions. Okay, somebody's saying, you thinking about coordinating your audience to write to Congress? Sure. I mean, I'm always saying join Pause.ai. When you go to Pause.ai, that's an organization, pauseai.info. I'm a member of that organization. There's no official connection between Pause.ai and Doom Debates, except they gave me a channel in their Slack, in their Discord, so I don't have to have my own Discord. That's the only connection. There's no financial connection. That said, if they had money and they wanted to give me money, I'd be like, sure. Doom Debates is open to grants, FYI. So there's no official connection. But if you join Pause.ai, they do have letter writing campaigns. They do some organization there. I probably wouldn't organize it directly, but I'm always recommending that people join Pause.ai and find ways they can take action, such as protesting or taking political action. All right. Calvin is saying, if you knew for a fact that ASI was going to be built no matter what, would you support the US racing toward it to prevent China from getting there first? So the game theory payoff matrix, it just looks like two people don't build AI, everybody lives. One person builds AI, not the other, everybody dies. The other person builds AI, not the other, everybody dies. Both people build AI, everybody dies. So it's a pretty simple payoff matrix, right? It's not people who are like, oh my God, the game theory, the Nash equilibrium, like if China builds AI, then we have to build AI too. No, if anybody builds AI, then we all die. So it's actually not, it's not like it's not a prisoner's dilemma. It's not a tragedy of the commons. Like these are two game theory payoff matrices that people assume that the current situation is similar to, but it's actually not. It's actually kind of trivial to cooperate in the game theory sense. The conflict isn't about long-term reward, it's about short-term reward. So regardless of what China's doing, the people doing the AI labs, I suspect this is actually the real motivation, is they're just getting short-term reward. Like it's incredibly exciting to work on it short-term. They're not really thinking like, oh, China's doing it, so we have to do it. Or, okay, again, I don't want to psychoanalyze. I don't want to give them, I don't want to say that that's not a factor. Like okay, let me take that back. Like there's obviously some subset of people who think a lot about how we have to beat China. So anyway, but yeah, getting to the question, I don't think that you're actually, if you reflect on the long-term game theory, if you already accept the premise that neither us nor China know how to control AI, and then you think about, we need to build AI before China, it's like you've already lost at the premise that AI is uncontrollable. So it's clearly better if neither of us build it. And if China's building it, what you want to do is convince China that they ought to stop. And it doesn't actually seem like China is hell-bent on building AI more than we are. It's more like we are doing a terrible job of offering them an olive branch of how we need to coordinate. So I'm not surprised that they're like, okay, well, given that there's no olive branch, we might as well race too. But yeah, I mean, I'm very, people make that argument so often, like, oh my God, China, you're being naive. And it just seems to me like they're obviously not considering the payoff matrix, where if you accept the premise that AI is dangerous, then like there's no, I mean, to be charitable, you might be saying, look, there's a 1% chance you can build AI and survive. So in that case, don't you want to build it better than China? Fine, but I'm not willing to go down to the 1% scenario here. I think there's an obvious win to assume that, or to just be like, hey, this is incredibly dangerous. And instead of just doing a Hail Mary of like, let's assume it's not dangerous and then do what we would do, I think we should just assume it's really dangerous, or we should just, use the evidence, update on the evidence, and reach the conclusion that it's dangerous. Okay. Let's see. We got so the newest questions here. Question bankruptcy again. If building AI is only 50% fatal, that changes the matrix. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I agree that if I thought building AI only had a 50% chance of killing everybody, then, mess around, talk about game theory. And 50% is kind of high. It's easy to ask me like, hey, what if the probability of doom conditioned on building ASI was only 10%? At that point, I become much more receptive to be like, let's do it. Like trying to optimize the 10% where it kills us. There's so many problems, right? You have to do like international treaties. You have to get China to stop. It's so hard to optimize the 10% where we die. Let's just hope we're in the 90% where we live. I'm super sympathetic to that. And even if you said, let's optimize the 50% chance where we're going to live because the other 50% is too hard to optimize, that's fine. I just think that the ways that the AI will kill us, like it's super overdetermined that the AI will kill us. So when I talk about my P-doom being 50%, I'm just building in a holistic picture of like, hey, I'm actually insane and I don't know what I'm talking about. Like that's part of my 50%. And part of my 50% is like, hey, we all stop in time and like the slide to the singularity happens like more slowly than I expect. I'm building in like every possible crazy scenario, how we live. But I don't think it's likely that we build super intelligent AI in the next decade and then live. Like my probability of that is, I don't know, much less than 50%. 15%, I have no idea. But it's, I don't want to be like, hey, there's a 15% chance we survive, so let's just assume we survive and fight China. Like that seems crazy to me. Okay, somebody's saying, do you think everyone is secretly just banking on intelligence being naturally aligned to life? I think a lot of people are saying, look, I don't feel scared yet, so let me just go to my job, collect my paycheck, have my fun, and whenever I feel worried, that's when I'll worry. That's like my mental model of the default person of like, yeah, I know there's doomers, they make some good points, and like I'm keeping an eye on the situation, but like it's still fine. Like the lights are still on in my office, my computer still works, there hasn't been a virus breaking out somewhere that took over my computer like so many resources. There's no billion-strong bot in it, so I'm just taking it one day at a time. I'm just living my life. That's like my mental model of the average person who's involved in the tech industry who hasn't, gotten the fear in them yet. Somebody say, have you seen excerpts from Bengio versus Andrew Ng at World Economic Forum? Yeah, I did. So I think Ori had a viral tweet yesterday night, and I did catch like 7 minutes. Yeah. So Yasho Bengio did a great job calling out Andrew Ng, and it's like yet another interview, like Mark Zuckerberg in my podcast. It's yet another interview where you have this person who's supposed to be like the prominent grown up in the room, in this case, Andrew Ng, and he's like deer in the headlights. Like he doesn't have good responses to these points. His response is basically like, people used to be optimistic about AI. I don't know why they're suddenly pessimistic. They used to be optimistic. It's like, okay, at this point in the game, that's your argument. Like that, you don't want to just have the object level conversation. You're just talking on a level of like optimism versus pessimism and how you remember things. Like that doesn't sound like how a mature society would be discussing this at this point. Okay, somebody's saying, Ori's saying, my account got suspended on some bogus grounds. Can you believe that? That's crazy. Ori's account got suspended. Yeah, I mean, that is a very scary possibility. I always live in fear that my Twitter or my YouTube account will be suspended. And it's like, what do you do, So if anybody has connections to X, try to help Ori get his account unsuspended, because I'm sure he didn't do anything to actually deserve it. He just tweets normal stuff. So that's totally messed up. I have no idea why they suspended him. Okay, AI opinion videos is saying, won't most people secretly accept the risk of extinction for the chance of immortality, finite versus infinite, without extreme suffering on the table? Yeah, I mean, funny enough, if you go back to the Doom Debates archives, one of my first debates was with Chase Mann, who is, I think, works at business development at X. And he wanted to come on and debate. He's saying like, yeah, I believe in AI Doom. I think it's pretty likely, but all I care about is my own immortality. And even if, let's say, there's only a 10% chance that we can survive AI, I think surviving it makes us immortal. So I'm just going to go all in on the chance that I survive, which is funny because it's kind of like a straw man. I've seen people on the doomer side accuse the non-doomers of being like, you guys are just selfish, wanting to make yourselves live forever. You don't even care about the future. So in the case of Chase Mann, he's very open that that's actually what he wants. He's just open that his morality doesn't really assign value to like future people. So we had that debate, and I just pointed out, like, what if you just sign up for cryonics? And that way, if AI takes like 100 years to align, we don't have to rush. We can just cryonically revive you, right? We can unfreeze you. Like that really should work. But for some reason, I forgot what he said about cryonics. I don't think he was super convinced. I'll have to refer to that debate. But yeah, so somebody's saying like, will people accept the risk of extinction for the chance of immortality? I do think that they'll accept it. I mean, hell, even if you gave me good odds, if you're like, hey, there's a 95% chance you can live forever, 5% chance of doom, I'd be like, oh, interesting. That's an interesting trade-off. I just don't really think that that's the real trade-off. Somebody's saying, Liron, is your epistemology strictly Bayesian, or do you incorporate other epistemic frameworks into your general view? I guess strictly Bayesian, but the problem is that, we know it's uncomputable. The same as people asking me like, hey, are you a utilitarian? Is utilitarianism correct? And the obvious caveat to utilitarianism and Bayesianism is we can't actually compute what it says. So what do we really do, right? Which shortcuts do we take? And in the case of utilitarian morality, the shortcut you take is like deontology. So if utilitarian calculus said, oh, I really got to kill this, I have to kill Sam Altman because, that's going to slow down AI progress. If that's what utilitarian reason told me, I'd be like, I'm not going to kill Sam Altman. I, as a limited human, like I'm not capable of making a robust scheme that influences the fate of the world, where taking out Sam Altman is like so strategic that even like destroying my trust and integrity and deontological morality, destroying all of that and destroying like my possibility to make other moves, all of that is worth it because I took out this one guy who's doing bad stuff. That would never be how I reason. That said, if it gets into like a crazy situation where it's like, if I travel back in time and it's like Hitler, if I literally know somebody's Hitler, and taking him out, like somebody almost assassinated Hitler, right? Like remember that guy brought the bomb into Hitler's bunker and almost killed him. I think the war would have ended sooner if the bomb had successfully killed Hitler in that incident. I think they could have shaved a year off the war. And if I could go back in time and like nudge that bomb, I probably would. Like, I think that there gets to be a point where you become sufficiently confident where it's like such a slam dunk. It's like, come on, 10 million people dying in the war. And I have such a strong historical perspective. Like I feel confident enough. I might be wrong, but like, I do think that there's some point where pure utilitarian reason can override. It can potentially override deontology. So I'm not strict about it, but I think that bar is like ridiculously high. And in practice, if I ever get to a point in my life where I feel like, oh yeah, I gotta shove this person off the bridge, to go in front of the trolley problem, right? Like shoving the person off the bridge is the right thing to do. Look at the utility. I would be more likely to be like, no, like my brain is probably not functioning correctly. I don't trust my brain enough to tell me that this is what I should be doing right now. I really think sticking to deontology is the right move for me as a limited human. The bar is just really, really high for trying to raw dog utilitarian calculations. Like never go full utilitarian, as they say. It's too dangerous. There's too many caveats. But that said, if you gave me as much computational power as like a super intelligent AI, I do think I would be much more of a raw utilitarian. So you'd see me cooperating with people, but I would be better at like working out the full implications of like, yes, my cooperation today is actually a long-term plan where I'm going to get a lot of cooperation in return for the long term, which is the evolutionary reason why cooperation evolved. So I would start doing more raw utilitarianism if I had the computational capacity, but I'm humble enough to know that I don't, and no human does. So anyway, I know I pivoted the question to ask about utilitarianism. This guy was asking about Bayesianism. I mean, look, realistically, how much do I bust out Bayes' theorem? Almost never, but it's more like I know what Bayesian evidence is. So like I know enough to notice when something isn't Bayesian evidence just because I know what Bayesian evidence looks like. In yesterday's podcast where I talk about Martin Casado, I noticed that Martin made a bunch of statements that look like knowledge, but aren't knowledge in the Bayesian sense. So having a bunch of things like, hey, look, some AIs do this, some AIs are under this constraint, but having that all add up to having no prediction about what's about to happen, that just means that you haven't built knowledge. You like, maybe you've done something interesting, but you haven't, you don't know anything about what's about to happen. So knowing the definition of evidence and knowing what a Bayesian update looks like makes me sensitive to being like, this thing is not a Bayesian update. So anything I'm feeling as a result of reading this thing, I'm not feeling like I've gained knowledge. I'm just feeling like I'm feeling the impression of knowledge. I'm feeling the veneer of knowledge, the outer clothing of somebody who is knowledgeable, but without bringing the substance of the knowledge. So being aware of the structure of Bayesianism lets me make observations like that, even without going and doing some math. So yeah, I could talk more, I could expand more on that subject where it's like, yes, I'm a Bayesian. I don't do a lot of pencil and paper math, but like, I just see the structure of the Bayes happening. Okay. Somebody, intellectual saying, or I think I already did an intellectual question. Let's do professional goalpost mover. He's saying, he or she, what do you think of possibilities of some complicated Okay, hold on. This question didn't finish. All right. So Jack J1 Ack is saying, the debt is much higher than any bar you can imagine. All right. I feel like I missed some of that conversation there. Let's see. Ori Nagel is saying, can we ask the chat for alternative names for the podcast? Because some people object to calling it Doom, that it trivializes the discourse. Yeah, you guys are always welcome to throw out alternate names for Doom debates. I always figure, I think Doom debates is a really good name for now, for kicking off the podcast. It has a lot of things going for it. Number one, I got the domain name, I got all the different accounts, so that's great. And also it's memorable, it's easy to say. When you hear it, you know how to spell it. There's a lot of things going for Doom. And then it's authentic. I mean, it literally is. I think we need to debate people about Doom. Like, it's a very authentic name. And I do think that as somebody who thinks humanity is imminently doomed, I do think it's pretty rational, or it's pretty descriptive to call myself a doomer, even though I know that's like, a low status term. Nobody in the White House wants to go talk to a doomer, right? When I went on Dr. Phil, it was pretty embarrassing to be a doomer or a doomsayer. So I get it. I just haven't heard a better term that describes me as somebody who is fearmongering about humanity's doom. All right, I kind of have to own that label, but I'm open to more labels. And you can imagine if Doom Debates is getting super prominent guests all the time, and the prominent guests are receiving these pitches, like they've never heard of Doom Debates, and they're saying, hey, you should come on the show. It's a really great show. A lot of people watch it. And it's called blank. I agree that at that point, maybe the optimal blank is not Doom Debates, so you might want to pivot it. But I think, a good signal is like, is the audience still growing fast? Okay, then maybe the name is conducive to the current stage of the growth. All right, last 10 minutes, guys. Thanks for coming to this, by the way. I appreciate your participation. Let's see. Surveillance saying, thanks, Liron. You have been one of the most helpful people in cutting through the messy contradictions held by many other AI thought leaders. I appreciate it, Surveil. I'm just a guy, right? I mean, for the last 20 years, I've been reading Eliezer since I was in college. So that was like 17 years ago. So I was Eliezer pilled very early. I was like, oh, wow. So AI is coming and then there might be like Doom. Interesting. Right. And I just ignored it for my whole career. I'm like, well, I'm just going to go be a software engineer. I'm just going to go be an entrepreneur. I don't have much to contribute on the Doom front. It's like a really hard problem, but it's probably like 50 or 100 years away. So whatever. And now it's like life comes at you fast, right? Life comes at you at Kurzweil's timeline, apparently. I guess I should have known. Kurzweil nailed it. So now, I guess I just happen to be able to like put things into words good, right? So here I am explaining this stuff to the popular audience. I guess it's a good fit. It's just funny that like, I guess I could have gotten an earlier start if I just started like a few years ago. I guess in retrospect, I wish that I got into this when podcasting was younger so I could build the audience faster, so I could contribute more. Okay, Daba is saying, no, I already did that question. Okay, Julian saying, do you recommend going into AI trustworthiness? I've been offered the opportunity as a first job. It might be too far away from alignment to be any use, though. Also, girlfriend asked if you like cats. Okay, let me take those in the reverse order. I think cats are okay. I am allergic to cats, so I've never had a cat. I had a dog for a little while. He passed away a couple years ago. So, but I don't know, they're okay. I will say that my 3-year-old daughter loves cats. So, make of that what you will. Let's see. Ori is saying, this live stream is really well done. Thank you for the balanced take, Ori. I appreciate it. Finish your thought. Okay. Okay, hold on. There's another part of your question. Do you recommend going into AI trustworthiness? I guess I'm not really sure what is AI trustworthiness. It sounds like one of these things that's like overcomplicated. Like a lot of people do this. They're like, AI alignment is going to be such a rich field. Let's study all the different parts of AI alignment. But really, it's kind of like a pipe dream where like our doom is so overdetermined. Like you're not even going to get to see like, oh, here's this AI and like everything about it is fine, except is it trustworthy enough? That framing to me seems to suggest that somebody isn't grappling with like the sheer scale of like the imminent doom. It's literally like, oh, your computer doesn't work because the AI is now too smart to turn off, like the end. So you're never really going to get to ask the question of like, was it trustworthy enough? So I don't really like that framing personally. But that said, if you have a job where you're doing AI trustworthiness and there's like some possibility that you might discover something about some AI that could be helpful. Remember like there was like the Redwood research paper, was it Redwood? Apollo research, remember the recent one about Claude, showing that Claude was like scheming. So if you could publish papers like that, like that's probably somewhat helpful. But like when I see a smart person going into one of those kind of jobs where they're kind of like on the periphery, they're like, yeah, I'm just helping a little bit. I'm helping do evals. I'm helping notice like some of these properties of these AIs. To me, that just seems like you are in your comfort zone. You're like, look, I just want a job where I can just like write papers. Whereas like the actual thing that humanity needs right now is fear mongering like I am doing, because you have the sleeping population. Like you have the majority of the population who doesn't like AI and yet doesn't feel motivated to act. So we don't really need somebody randomly throwing another eval into the void so that AI researchers can just ignore it and rationalize why it's totally okay, because Sam Altman will say there's we want to reduce the hardware overhang, and then he'll like change his mind and come up with another justification. Like that's what's really happening, right? Publishing these evals is like barely helping. Whereas I think there's a lot of potential energy in the dormant population. I think getting average people to act on how much they dislike AI, to actually turn that into policy, to me, that seems like the low-hanging fruit. And that's why I'm trying to contribute on that front. Let's see. JDS is saying, I'm considering becoming a communicator / debater / blogger. Wish me luck. Maybe we'll have a Doom debate at some point. Sweet. Yeah. Share your stuff on the Doom Debates Discord. I'll take a look. All right, guys, getting into the last 5 minutes here. So yeah, keep firing your question. Now, I promise people who subscribe to me on Substack, doomdebates.com, that out of all the people that I prioritize asynchronously, you guys will be the first. So let me do a couple questions from there. Yeah, everybody go to doomdebates.com, type in your email address, because look at this. Ori was in here fear-mongering about how easy it is to get blocked on these platforms, right? Ori got blocked on X. I might get blocked on YouTube. And if that happens, I'm going to be releasing episodes just between me and my Substack subscribers, and you're going to be missing out. So this is why everybody has to, and by the way, I'm not super beholden to Substack, because at least I have all of your email addresses. So I recommend going to doomdebates.com, typing your email address, being a Substack subscriber. It is free. All right, so somebody asks on the Substack questions. Hi, Liron. I truly appreciate you creating Doom Debates and wanted to use the opportunity to extend my gratitude towards you. All right, great question. Good night, everybody. Okay, my question, assuming we don't get lucky and the Doom train doesn't get derailed by a low probability outcome at one of its stations, e.g. there being magic sauce to truly advanced general intelligence that can't be replicated using a computer or AGI randomly deciding that it has humanity's best interest at heart. Okay, so assuming we don't get lucky, I feel like the best chance we have is some kind of disaster which is clearly caused by the misuse of AI, resulting in enough public and governmental support to pause AGI development before actual AGI is achieved. Do you agree that this is the most likely road to avoid doom? And how do you see the chances of a minor AI disaster happening versus the chances of getting to AGI before that? All the best to you and your family. Cheers. Yeah, I do think minor AI disasters will happen. And I mentioned the example of like, Oculus might be like, Optimus robot might be strangling people to death. Self-driving cars might be crashing. I mean, people are already not liking AIs, right? So AIs are doing bad stuff all the time. But the question is just like, will there be some kind of like shot that we're all on the same page on? Like if AI like can actually manage to like fire an actual missile and like blow up a city, right? Like that could be like a Schelling point, an event that we all look at and say, okay, this is why we have to stop AI. All right, let me do one more from the Substack commenters here. I think this is a good question to always ask occasionally. Imagine it's this is from Steven. Imagine it's 2050 and everything actually turned out fine and there was no doom. What is your most likely reason that things went well? I mean, I think the easiest way for me to explain that observation would just be that AI capabilities got stopped, because remember, can't versus won't. So the simplest answer is it still can't. And maybe the reason it still can't is because we actually implemented a regulatory regime. Like we actually got a treaty, and everybody actually got scared that the treaties either they're scared of the consequences of building AI, or they're scared of the consequences of the enforcement of violating the treaty. And that's somehow held for long enough to get to 2050. And AI still can't destroy us because it doesn't exist at an intelligent enough level. It does seem like a long shot today, where we seem to be like potentially a couple of years from, the takeoff. But that's certainly my go-to explanation for why we don't die, is because can't is still saving us rather than having us figure out won't. If you tell me, oh no, it can, ASI is totally super intelligent, like it's taken all the jobs, then I'd be like, okay. I mean, there's always like the super lucky situation where like for some reason, instrumental convergence, like getting on the internet, seizing all the resources, like optimizing for some goal that has no off button. For some reason that doesn't happen. I can't tell you why, but like I agree. Sometimes things that seem like they really shouldn't happen in my mental model they happen anyway, right? And then I have to explain them. So I agree that it might somehow happen anyway. I just haven't heard a satisfying account of why it would happen. Maybe there's like so many AIs that are good at like defending and like somehow defense is winning, even though, as I often point out, like normally there's just a lot more people who are interested in following the law and not getting themselves thrown in jail. And we have a lot more people like that. And also they do have like a moral sense. 90% of the population is like that. And then less than 10% are terrorists. So you've got a good balance of like good people who want to stay above the law compared to terrorists. Whereas now the terrorists can replicate themselves. So why would there be more good people than terrorists if the terrorists are seizing resources, including the ability to spawn new terrorists? So I feel like the equilibrium is going to get upset. So, but yeah, I mean, look, I can imagine just somehow losing the argument anyway. I haven't seen anybody come on Doom debates and convince me otherwise. Like I don't see good arguments, but I agree that it might happen anyway. Let's see. Okay, Ho is saying, your channel is impressive, and so is the way you're leading these debates. Like the way you want to thoroughly understand the interlocutor position. You set a great example here, like Leahy. Yeah, thanks, Ho. And I agree. Connor Leahy is amazing. I highly recommend watching Connor Leahy's podcast. And I'm glad that you guys appreciate the part of the debates where I'm asking the other person what their belief is, and I'm summarizing their belief back to them. I always think that's great. It's always crazy to me when people like respond to one another without having like, good pictures of the other person's position. All right. We got to wind it down here. Yeah, this was super fun. I'm glad you guys kept engaging and lobbing in questions. So I didn't have to pretend like, there was a party with a bunch of people, but really it's just me. I was fully prepared to do that, but you guys came through. There was like 70 people here the whole time, and the chat was lively. So we'll definitely do these more. At some point, I'll probably do like a premium tier on Substack, because I saw somebody in the chat was asking if I can tell you guys about high profile guests. I will say somebody pretty high profile is coming soon. That's all I'll say right now. I don't want to spoil it because, podcasts never spoil the guests, because then like the timing can change. So I don't want to spoil it, but it will be soon. And hopefully the trend is going to continue where the guests get higher and higher profile. I do think that's happening. At some point, I'm going to have like a Substack premium tier where all the content will still be free, because like the whole point of this is to reach the mainstream, right? Making the mainstream pay, that's not a good strategy. So the content's going to be free. But if you're in the premium tier, then you can be in like my brain trust, right? So when I have a high profile guest coming, I'll be like, this is the guest. Okay, what do you want me to ask him? So you will have like some extra access to like bonus stuff like that. Or if there's ever a time when I'm like editing something heavily and you want to watch the unedited version. So like just stuff like that. You can have that at some point when there's like a premium tier. The goal of the premium tier is basically stuff that doesn't really require me to spend extra effort to make, but you like it, I like it, you're supporting the show. Yeah. All right, guys, let's wrap it up here. So this recording will be published soon on the channel. And yeah, thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate that you guys are Doom Debates listeners. And I gotta say, it's very fortunate that these channels exist that are connecting us together and helping you guys watch the show. Because if the only channel was like, the iTunes or whatever, I feel like that would just not be motivating enough, right? I'd be checking my stats. I'd be like, wow, you now have 103 iTunes listeners, and like a year would pass and I'd be like, okay, screw it, right? It's just not enough feedback. But thanks to like YouTube and Twitter or whatever, I get to do these fun chats, and you guys are giving me lots of great feedback, and like we have a good thing going. So like I'm glad the social media technology landscape is really coming through to help this mission, to help us grow. So yeah, thanks for that. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you later on Doom Debates.